Right, good afternoon. In our series where we look at at economics and its relationship with other subjects and applied economics, and also in terms of Africa, SADC, and Namibia, and global trends. In this video, we plan to focus with Mr. Helmo Preus. We would like to focus on what are the biggest drivers in terms of trends in Africa and SADC from economic point of view, and then we will also focus on other global trends that have influence. First, I would like to say that it's very useful if one can identify the different variables or the biggest drivers. Because in economics there are millions of drivers or variables, and which one to focus on from a layman's perspective. It is almost a chaos trying to understand economics, from interest rates to demand and supply, and so there's just too many variables, and that's why predictions like the climate change, some of that is also a systemic term. We cannot even predict the climate for longer than 6 hours. And I don't know if economics are easier than economics. It's difficult to compare to systemic, and because we haven't modeled the climate or economics yet to make very accurate predictions. But how would you describe, Helmo, the biggest drivers? All
right, in terms of that, you've got three sort of, in a way, cliches. You've got black swans, you've got grey rhinos, and then you've got game changers. All right, so black swans are unpredictable events.
Yeah.
And an example of that would be the stroke that President P.W. Botha suffered in January 1989.
Yeah.
If that hadn't happened, if W wouldn't have taken over in September, there wouldn't have been a February 1990. So those kind of events that are unpredictable, those are the black swans. So an example of that, if you want to have a look in terms of risk, is you have a solar flare that destroys most of your internet network globally. And how do you back up against that? That's one black swan event that's out there. Grey rhinos are ones that are there, but people keep on ignoring it. So a grey rhino in the current situation would be the Chinese property market. We know that's a problem. The Chinese are trying to do something about it, but I think the problems are so large that ultimately they're not going to do it, and we'll have something similar to what happened in September 2008.
Part of that is over investment, or
over in investment and
enough demand.
And part of that grey rhino that we're seeing, and will be much more obvious in the next 2 to 3 years, as recent as that, is how much the demand for AI. You are looking at tremendous usage of energy. AI in 2 to 3 years will be as much as 3 or 4 US states. They're not building that fast enough. And then on top of that, you're moving to renewables, which is variable energy. So we're going to have grid collapses like we had in Texas with the cold snap in February last year, and those will become much more prominent.
Okay.
If on top of that, you then add sabotage, whether it's from right-wing conservatives who want to go against climate change, or whether it's actual sabotage by other industry players, like we had with the gas in the North, in the Baltic Sea.
Yeah.
Those are things you can anticipate to a certain extent, but it looks like it's a slow-moving accident. That's what a great I know. Whereas game changers are things that change your environment. Now, AI, the iPhone, those are things that have fundamentally changed how we operate. Other game changers would be the printing press, the steam engine, electricity, and in the current situation around here, the game changer is oil and gas discoveries. And you look at what's the gas in Mozambique is several times larger than in the North Sea.
Sure.
We don't get much coverage in Namibia about Brulpada, which is also a large one offshore Mossel Bay. Kudu has been discovered 30, 40 years, but now it could be exploited in terms of gas to power. And then obviously
due to technology.
Yeah, due to technology and the oil and gas now in the Orange River Basin. So those are game changers that we done. So those are the three things I would be looking at.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I like the catchy term we use from the grey rhino, slow moving accident.
Yeah.
And describe it, I think, very well from the way that you described.
Yeah. You're aware of it and you try and avoid it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's very difficult.
The frog in the warm water, it's very desirable, but no way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. If we focus on economic trends, you mentioned already AI and technology, and which other global trends do you think will have a big influence on the world?
Well, climate change is going to be there. I mean, depending on who you listen to, some people say we've already reached a tipping point and we're not going to be able to reverse it. Others say, this is just a normal fluctuation on a long-term situation. My personal view is we're at the tipping point already, or we have passed it already. But it is reversible. If we can get the rewilding going much more, then we can reverse it. But in everything like this, depends on money and people's willingness to give up things in order to improve something that doesn't necessarily improve their own lives immediately.
How do you think agriculture will completely change as a result of AI?
To a certain extent, it's not so much AI specifically. I think drone technology is much more hands-on. Obviously, that does use AI, but AI is not the major driver. Drone technology, it's more statistical analysis and measuring things. If the plant's green and thriving, you can see that on the video. You might put in fancy filters to say it's growing faster than it was, but it's just data analysis.
Yeah. Okay. The impact of again technology, biotechnology, nanotechnology in the medical field have some potential to accelerate. Do you think it will make the medical services more affordable or more costly?
I'm hoping that it makes it more affordable. And in terms of bio, I would aim more at preventative rather than curative. So if you take this pill, you will not be, your risks of getting type A, B, or C, it will be 30% less, 90% less, that kind of. So I'd be aiming it at more preventative rather than curative.
Yeah, or detecting even cancer, detecting a very early stage for you. Yeah, for the symptoms actually are visible. Yeah, visible. Okay. Then, central bank digital currencies. I mean, we used already for years digital currencies for the credit card system. Is there a possibility? What would you say? What is the probability in terms of 100 or 1 in itself that governments can abuse single bank digital currencies for surveillance and also for determining what you can buy and what you cannot buy?
Well, you got something similar already in China in terms of the social credit system.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily linked to your currency, but it's linked to your cell phone, your smartphone. So it can see what you're doing, and then can exclude you from certain benefits if you do something that's against what the government wants, whether it's smoking or drinking, or things like that. So that's already in effect. It may become more widespread in terms of that, but there is a pushback against that already, and saying no, you're invading my privacy. You're limiting my choices. If I want to have a cigarette, then I should be able to have a cigarette.
No.
And you look at what happened in New Zealand, where they tried to ban smoking, and that has now been pulled back by the subsequent government.
In terms of the big players in the tech industry, Facebook, Microsoft, Alibaba, these. Would you say it is probable that the governments will control these private companies, or is it the other way around?
If you look at economic history, I mean, we had the trust and the antitrust Sherman Act. So when you have too much power invested in, whether it's a government or whether it's a company, then governments will go back against them and try and break them up. So Standard Oil was broken up. IG Farben was broken up after the Second World War. So it will be constrained, and especially now if you're moving into a sort of bipolar trading block, you will have a sort of Eurocentric or US-centric trading block, and then Russia-Chinese trading block, and they will have their own systems, a SWIFT system, and you'll have another monetary exchange payment system that's aligned to the Chinese and the Russians.
Yeah.
So you become too big, somebody will try and take you down.
Yeah. If we want to look at the aging of populations, in many countries like Italy, Germany, and several others, and with the linked, if it can be linked with the negative population growth, like for example in China and Russia and several other countries, would you say that we will run into a problem of depopulation or overpopulation compared to the resources available? Because as technology improves, I think, if I'm correct, American the resources being used for the GDP have already peaked some decade or so ago. While the GDP is still going up, they actually use now less resources, and that's the same thing what happened in England, UK, if I understood correctly.
So what will happen is that as you move, you want to move down the cost curve. And if you look at cars, for instance, people growing up now say they'd rather use an Uber as opposed to owning a car. And it would be a similar thing. So, you won't get the supersized burger. They'll say, that's not for me. I want to rather to have something smaller, a plant-based burger.
If your understanding increase, become more informed, more critical.
Correct. So you will be using less resources, but your problem is, yes, you do have depopulation in terms of the more advanced economies, but the emerging economies, you are still seeing growth of, like Africa of 2% growth. India as well. So, and what's the advanced economies will need more and more immigration in order to sustain their demand and their production. But there is a pushback against that in terms of allowing immigrants, whether they're skilled or unskilled, into that country. And that's where the politics and the economics intertwine.
Yeah. Okay, so you would say that the question about, if I get it correctly, about depopulation or overpopulation,
it's undetermined.
Yeah, there will be balancing factors, So, if you look at Russia and Japan, for instance, and once the wars are over, Japan will take more people in from places like Korea and China.
Japan have a serious problem with it.
And will make it more welcoming for immigrants.
Yeah, that's correct. Are you familiar with the book written by Dr. Tupy?
No.
About 10 global trends?
No.
Very interesting book, a coffee table book there. Okay. And he was interviewed by Jordan Peterson about, he looked at global trends from the last few hundred years perspective. Also, one was about climate change and how the prices of actually certain commodities become affordable to the people and poverty has been reduced. So he's got a very positive message in saying that if you look over the last hundreds of years, we use resources much more productively due to technology. We will not necessarily run into a population overpopulation as a result of that. It's not a question of that we should be concerned that we're going to overpopulate the world as a result. And also in terms of climate change, that the Africa in the world, due to planting of trees, artificial for business purposes, Africa and the world is actually now greener than it was 50 years ago, because of the, for example, in America and also in Sahara, also with more excess, not excess, but more carbon dioxide available, plants can grow now faster. I think that people don't always realize that we're actually living in the best of all times.
Yep.
As from a medical point of view, from an information point of view. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, there's a Swedish statistician who does, that's part of his life work, is to show how much progress we have done over the last 50 years. Part of it is the data availability.
Yeah.
If you look at GDP data, and only started after the Second World War. Prior to the Second World War, there was no annual or quarterly GDP data available. In the case of South Africa, I think we only started in 1960.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of also data availability, but then the other part is to get the message across. Most media will say bad news sells, not the good news doesn't get covered. the fact that, you could
Look at in the street.
yeah. So there needs to be a balance in terms of that. But also, people have an individual bias. So I'm an optimist. So when I look at data, I have a confirmation bias. If I see good eaten once, I say, that's good. If I see bad news, I say, I should ignore that for the moment and see whether it continues.
Yeah. Would you say, if one look at the pattern or a trend, that one should always adequate and look at the time frame?
Yes, so you got to contextualize.
Otherwise, you lose complete perspective. If it's 100 years ago or 50 or 10, it makes a complete difference.
Correct.
So what we read in the newspaper is only what happened yesterday. Rarely what happened the last 50 years. So we tend to see just the bad news because that's why newspapers sell. But we tend to forget the perspective and the context of actually how positive things are.
No, most definitely. And it's up to the economists and the media to spread that message. Not only at election time, but
Yes.
generally speaking.
Renewable energy, BRICS, China, India, Russia. It seems to, from my perspective and information that I have, and I could be wrong, so please correct me if I am, that they are not really interested in on a massive scale to use renewable energy, because they're sitting on enough fossil fuels for years to come.
And not in the case. Remember, where are you? So Russia is in the frozen north, so they're not going to have solar, and they are sitting on lots of fossil fuels. But if you look at China, China is and it's responsible for more than half of the world's wind power and solar capacity year on year for the last 5 years. So they're pushing, and one of the reasons what that then involves, and we're talking about economies of scale. That's why they can produce solar panels cheaper than anybody else. That's why they can produce wind turbines, because they've got those economies of scale.
Yeah, and in the front line of these developments.
Yeah, they are right there, and it's not just solar panels. The world's largest pump storage is being built in China. It carries on. To give you another example, the Three Gorges Dam, that produces 22 gigawatt, which is half the capacity of South Africa's coal-fired power plants, and that's one single plant.
Half of South Africa.
22 gigawatts, as South Africa's capacity is 48 gigawatts, so it's slightly less than half.
It's a mega dam. That was the dam that replaced about, was it more than 1 million people?
2 million people.
2 million people.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And it's dam change in terms of the bloodline that goes back 700 kilometers.
Yeah.
No, it is just absolutely massive. The dam wall is 185 meters high. The length of the wall is 2.3 kilometers. It took. They started building in 1994, and it really finished building with the last generator went in 2007. So, and the scale of the Three Gorges is absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah. Didn't they build a mega dam in Spain as well?
Not to the same extent of Three Gorges.
And that's by far the biggest one.
Yeah, it's by far the biggest. It's half South Africa's electricity capacity at one place.
If one look at Cabora Bassa and Kariba, would you say that is too old to be used, or why can't the Southern African get that thing right in order to provide electricity? What are the biggest obstacles?
At the moment is climate change. So in Zambia at the moment is experiencing a drought. So there, the Kariba Dam capacity is currently sitting at 14%. So you can't push more water through, because then you go to zero.
Okay.
So that is a problem. And in terms of Zambezi, you are looking at the Batoka Gorge one downstream from the Victoria Falls. But now, if you look at Grand Inga, Grand Inga, if it's fully developed, would be twice the size of three gorges.
What?
40 gigawatts. 40.
Wow.
Now, so
where is the place with that?
I think it's on the Congo River.
On the Congo River.
Yeah. So you've got it. Inga 1 and 2 already developed, but they're 40 years old.
Wow.
And Grand Inga has been talked about for, at least we signed an agreement in 2005, I think, to take some of 2.5 gigawatts of that 40 gigawatts available. But it's in a region that's not particularly politically stable. So you have an ongoing civil war there currently. In the eastern DRC.
So it's possible that it can potentially be linked to the South African power pool.
That's
the plan.
Yes. So Inga 1 and 2, they've got a direct current high transmission line going to Katanga.
Okay.
And that's 1,000 kilometers through the bush.
Yeah.
So, but
if one look at electricity and the role it played in China only actually started massive development when they produced much more electricity than what they actually needed. And I think that is a trend with many countries in the world. If you need to produce, obviously depending on your neighbors, but if you can have excess production of electricity, it makes industrialization and several other industries, education possible, students studying at light and so on. And now with the problem that you have with Eskom, would you say that if South Africa can get Eskom right, then it depends on what one defines as right, but how big a role electricity and Eskom play in the South African economy at the moment as a stumbling block?
It's a massive problem in terms of load shedding. So that has, and you can choose any figure that you want, but the estimates are between 8% and 15% is how much over the last 5 years the South African economy could have grown by. And added on to that is Transnet problems. We just, some estimates say 1 billion per day. That's 365 billion a year. So those problems are there. And you've also got to consider that in terms of Africa, there's 600 million people who do not have access to electricity.
Wow.
So it is so vast. Electricity is in the same way that oil is. It's the fuel that drives an economy.
Okay, I think we are already running in the next video. Thank you so much, Mr. Preus, and we will then continue.
Okay.
Thank you very much.